Multiculturalism is failing because you need one culture to cohesively work together towards one goal. If everyone's working towards different goals,
I just
can't you have multiculturalism with assimilation? Can't you have a melting pot?
That's what we have in Australia, though. We are a multicultural society in Australia. I think we do have some issues where some cultures might not integrate as well as other cultures, but on the whole, we are a real melting pot of cultures here, and I think people could say it's largely been successful, that we respect and we share values, but there are so many different cultures that work harmoniously and live harmoniously together here.
That's the problem. People don't actually know what multiculturalism is. In Canada, if you ask people, they'll tell you multiculturalism is people of different skin colors coming into Canada and then assimilating to the culture. That's not what it is. What multiculturalism means is literally multiple cultures in one area. That doesn't work. You can have one culture that plenty of people come to and assimilate to, that has the same values, that has the same laws. You cannot have multiple cultures working towards the same goals because they are going to have different needs for the laws of the nation. They're going to have different needs for the schooling.
How do you see Australia then? I know you've only just arrived, but we are different cultures living together here in Australia.
Yes, and like much of the West, that isn't going to last for very long. We look at this and we say the multicultural experiment is working because it's been working for 20 years. That's not going to last. We are living off the fumes of greater civilizations. We are living off the fumes of Western culture. And once Western culture becomes the minority view in Western nations, you're not going to have that culture that values freedom of speech. You're not going to have that society that values rule of law. You're not going to have that society that values democracy. It is all about having at least more than 50% of your population that believes in Western culture and Western culture alone.
But Lauren,
you can't
in Australia we have
where Western culture is the minority.
But Lauren, in Australia we have a very ordered migration system. We know who's coming into the country. We have a process of vetting people, whether they're coming through the humanitarian intake or coming through as economic migrants or under short-term migration program. You know, we know precisely who's coming in here and whether they are suitable to assimilating and valuing what we value. So how can you have a problem with that? What's an issue with having people from...
You still have these no-go zone areas, much like the rest of the West. Sure, it may be going at a slower rate because you have vastly slowed down your immigration here in Australia. You've stopped the boats. So it's going at a slower rate than the rest of the West. But eventually, certainly if you keep going leftward in progressive ideology, it will speed up and you'll be like France. You'll be like Molenbeek and these areas in Europe where so many people have come in and just created their own little communities where Western European values no longer are espoused. What's fascinating about Australia is you have a Multiculturalism Act that defines your multiculturalism as we do not identify as a culture, we identify with values. But all of the values that are listed are values that are inherent to Western culture and no other culture like it, like the value of free speech, like the value of rule of law, like the value of democracy. These were all things that came from Europe and all things that came from the West. And culture is defined as a shared set of values. So how can you say you are a multicultural nation when you value only things that Western culture has created?
Well, I think there's multiple cultures within the West. There's no one Western culture. There's so many different cultures that fall within the West that also share the same values of free speech, democracy, around the world.
Such as?
Equality. Well, throughout the West, there's different cultures within Europe, that Greece, Rome, places
yes, but
where
they're all part of the West.
But there's more than one culture in the West.
Greece and Rome were part of the West.
But there's more than one culture in the West. That's what I began by saying.
Sure, there are subcultures of Western culture, but Western culture is the encompassing culture.
Start off with you, Lauren, and get your thoughts and see what the panel think about them, because you've created a bit of a stir since you've been in the country. I suppose you are a provocateur in a way, and one of the things you've had a go at is the concept of multiculturalism. And we in Australia reckon we're pretty good at this multicultural caper. I know America does a great job of it and Canada is pretty strong as well. But what's wrong with multiculturalism, the immigrant nations having so many different cultures living side by side and getting along pretty well?
Well, the problem is that it's working for now, but we're naive in living in this luxury where at the moment we have a majority in Western nations that believe in Western culture and respect Western values. Free speech, democracy, rule of law. But as soon as the people who respect those values become the minority, I guarantee your multicultural paradise is not going to work so well. And because that future is not coming until the next generation, because it's going to be Gen Z or their kids that inherit this disaster, we seem to not care about it. We seem to not care about what the inevitable conclusion of our multicultural open borders policies will lead to. Granted, Australia isn't so bad right now. In fact, you're a dream compared to places like France or Greece.
Yeah, well, this is my point. Yeah, I think in Western Europe, obviously they've got difficulties there, but that's the issue, isn't it, really? You talk about generations. It's understandable, I suppose, new immigrants, if they're adults especially, might have difficulty integrating, but we expect the next generation to integrate more so, and that's been the experience, certainly in Canada, the US and Australia over the years.
Not so much, actually. I'm from Vancouver, Canada, where we have almost half Chinese population. And granted, the Chinese population, they don't commit much crime, so it's not that bad. However, they've bought out most of the property in my city, and that has given them a lot of political clout. That's given them a lot of control over the city. So what we're seeing is we've had the communist Chinese flag raised over our town halls. We've had political meetings starting to be made in Chinese. We've had that culture begin to dominate our country. We live in a cultural mosaic in Canada, and what that means, unfortunately, is that some parts of that mosaic can get bigger and just engulf and take over other parts of it. And right now in Vancouver, that is the Chinese part. And will my kids 50 years from now, will they be speaking English or Chinese in Canada? We don't know, because right now, we are just praising the idea of diversity and multiculturalism and not deciding whether we have any set values, not saying we are a Western nation, we are an English-speaking nation, we value free speech, we value rule of law. If we don't set these things in stone, then why be a nation at all? Why not get rid of our borders and just become post-national, become a part of Egypt, become a part of Sweden? The West, Australia, Canada, we have unique identities, and they have to be defended against people coming in that may want to change them.
Well, indeed, they're the values that attract people in the first place. Sarah, do you see this sort of talk as fear-mongering or a salient warning, given some of the problems we've seen, particularly in Western Europe?
Well, Chris, certainly here in Australia, we are proudly the most successful multicultural country, I think, in the world. And, certainly we have seen an increased focus by our government on the importance of integration. There has been a lot of work done on English and making sure that Australian citizens have English, and of course the Citizenship Minister has a proposal or has a discussion paper in relation to ensuring that when someone is applying for permanent residency, that they have a basic grasp of conversational English. And I think that's a very good thing. It's very good for our economic growth, for our jobs, and of course for integration. But I think, Chris, at the end of the day, we are very proudly a multicultural nation. We all come from somewhere else except our first Australians. And we just have to continue to work hard to make sure that we do integrate as a community and as a nation.
Yeah, I think that's important to make those points. And Corey, I'm keen to get your thoughts on this. This is why I think it's worth hearing from Lauren, because you've got to work hard at this stuff. We don't have harmony by accident. And you have to work hard at it.
I need to jump in here.
Just hang on a second, Lauren. We'll just hear from Corey first.
Sure.
I want to make the point. I'm not from somewhere else. I was born here. My ancestors might have been from somewhere else. So we're not all from somewhere else. I'm Indigenous to this country. Multiculturalism is a flawed and failing doctrine. All cultures are not equal. We should defend our cultures. We should stand up for the values that we believe are important and enduring. And we should have no truck for the people that want to come here and colonise it with their own cultural values. And I make the point, over the last 30 or 40 years, when multiculturalism became the doctrine, when Al Grasby introduced it, we've now got racial problems in this country. Today, the Prime Minister acknowledged finally that we've got an African gang problem in Victoria. We know that in New South Wales you've got Muslim enclaves where, you know, they're trying to implement Sharia law and they're trying to challenge the orthodoxies that we have. We have the same thing here in South Australia. Now, the history of Australia and its success has been you're insisting that people who come here integrate, they adopt our values, they become part of the way of life. Now, unfortunately, it's changed because people come here for the welfare checks and the indulgences of the weak people in Parliament.
Yeah, look, Lauren, is this a matter of semantics to a degree? Because people talk about multi-ethnic versus multicultural. I mean, you don't want to take it too far. Of course you don't want to accede to Sharia law, and of course you don't want people not to learn our language and integrate into our legal system and our values, but it's perfectly reasonable, in fact, enriching for people to practice other elements of their culture and share them with people in this country.
Well, I'm so glad that he acknowledged that multiculturalism is indeed failing here, while the other panelists mentioned, oh no, we have people learning English, we have language classes, we have integration. That's not what multiculturalism is. Multiculturalism is not people assimilating. It literally means to have multiple cultures. If one culture doesn't respect the English language and that's not part of their identity, it's not multiculturalism for them to then assimilate and learn English. And this is the great issue. You'll find people say diversity is our strength, multiculturalism is our strength, without even knowing what the word means. So for the Australians to know, much as the Canadians need to know this too, multiculturalism does not mean people of different ethnicities come to your country and then assimilate and learn the language and integrate into your culture. It means they come to your country and they make their own country within your country. They don't talk to you. They don't hire you for their jobs. They don't engage with you. Maybe you sometimes visit each other and you'll try the different foods, whatever. But for the most part, it means segregated different communities with different cultures, which, this is the scariest part, are working towards different goals.